Good morning. We're going to take a step away from accents in this video and talk about classical music. Of course, you'll be able to listen to what I'm saying and listen to how I pronounce stuff. So hopefully, listening to watching this video is going to help your accent anyway. So I mean, this channel is about being Porsche. And that doesn't just cover accents, it covers a lot of other stuff. And I think if you're trying to develop a Porsche accent, I suspect you're wanting to appear more cultured, educated, and sophisticated. So classical music naturally comes into that. And I think that if you want to be a cultured and sophisticated person, then I think listening to classical music is going to help you get to that place, and I'm going to explain why in this video. So you'll probably gather that I'm a metalhead. I love metal music. That's a big part of my life. Nevertheless, I do listen to classical music. I enjoy classical music, and I think that you should listen to classical music too. I think there's a great benefit in doing so. I think a lot of metal people actually quite like classical music. The two genres, while they're completely different, do to some extent go together quite well. And a lot of metal music has taken influence from classical music to varying degrees. So, I liked classical music as a child, but I didn't really know that much about it until I reached the age of 11, when they released these wonderful magazines called the Classical Collection series. So, in the Classical Collection, each magazine issue was focused on a particular composer. There was stuff in there about the composer's life, about their music. Um, and the magazine came with a CD or cassette. You could choose either. And it was a terrible dilemma for me. Do I spend my money on buying these wonderful classical collection magazines, or do I spend my pocket money on comics? It was a terrible dilemma. I really agonized about it because I didn't have enough pocket money to buy both. In the end, I bought 3 issues of the Classical Collection magazine. One which was about Mozart, one which was about Vivaldi, and the other one which was about Tchaikovsky. And of course, they didn't mention the fact that Tchaikovsky was a gay man in the magazine at the time. And the CD that they came with contained some well-known pieces of music by those composers. And I very much enjoyed that. And not long after those magazines were released, my mother treated me by buying me the CD for Holt's The Planets. My parents were middle class, very bourgeois people who valued education, and one of the wonderful things that they did was buy a box set of classical CDs, collections of various different composers, and I enjoyed listening to those. When I was a bit older, at the age of about 13, I became very enthusiastic about opera. And I became particularly enthusiastic about Richard Wagner and his music and operas. I didn't have very much money at the time when I was 13 or 14, so I couldn't buy very many Wagner CDs. But I did manage to watch a few of Wagner's operas on television. When I received an inheritance about 10 years ago, I treated myself to a complete box set of Richard Wagner's operas, and I listened to those fairly regularly. Every Good Friday, I have a personal tradition of always listening to Wagner's Parsifal, which of course contains the sublime Good Friday music. That's part of my Good Friday routine. So, I'm also a Roman Catholic, at least I have been for the past 9 years since I converted, and I really enjoy religious music, classical choral music. I love music by Monteverdi, Thomas Tallis, Palestrina, and more modern stuff by John Tavener. I feel very inspired by choral music. It's lovely to listen to. And yes, so why should one listen to classical music? Well, I'll give you 3 reasons why it's important to listen to classical music. The first one is it's a big part of our culture, classical music. It's influenced film music. Many film scores have taken influence from classical music, and even adverts on television will often feature pieces of classical music. You may well know lots of pieces of classical music without necessarily being able to name them or knowing which composer put them together. But I do think that you should know that. My idea of education is that education should make one into a Renaissance man who knows about all sorts of different aspects of our culture, and music is of course one of those. So I do think that if you can't name just a few pieces of famous, well-known classical music, then I do feel that your education has been a little bit deficient. I think that one should know a bit about classical music. And of course, if you're trying to be posh, then you're going to want to be cultured and educated and sophisticated, so you should have some basic knowledge of classical music. So I would recommend that you get into the habit of listening to classical music. Secondly, listening to classical music will help you to listen to music and to really appreciate it. One of the problems with a lot of popular music, with pop music and rock music, is it's very often focused on the singer, on the vocals, on listening to the lyrics. Maybe that's a little bit less the case with metal, which is perhaps a little bit more focused on the instruments. I mentioned earlier that there's a bit of a overlap between people enjoying metal and enjoying classical music. But in general, popular music tends to be very vocal-centric. So when people listen to pop music, they're not always appreciating the guitars or the drums or the keyboards or whatever instruments are featured. They're just singing along with the singer. With classical music, a lot of it is instrumental, and where there is singing in classical music, often it's in a foreign language, so you can't necessarily understand it. So you have to actually listen to the music and what's going on in the music. So by listening to that sort of thing, then you'll improve your listening skills. And that's something really valuable to be able to do. One habit to get into when you're listening to music is to focus on one particular instrument and to listen to that and just really hear what that instrument is doing. And maybe later on in that piece of music to switch to a different instrument and to listen to what that's doing. And then gradually you start to get an appreciation of how all those instruments are put together and form one tableau of music. Okay? And the third reason why you should listen to classical music is that I think it will make you feel good about yourself. It will improve your self-image and your self-confidence to listen to classical music. I find that when I listen to classical music, I feel good about myself. I feel that I'm an intelligent person, I'm a cultured person, I'm a sophisticated person. I'm not wasting my time listening to some dumbed-down pop music or doing something dumb or that's unproductive, but I feel that I'm sort of educating myself. And that really makes me feel good about who I am. And I think that you'll find that if you start to listen to classical music, that you'll start to think, I'm educated, I'm sophisticated, I'm cultured, I listen to classical music. You see, if you're trying to develop a posh accent, and you're trying to be this person who's cultured and classy and sophisticated, then you have to kind of have that image about yourself, and to kind of make yourself believe that this is the kind of person that you are, to make that kind of self-realization, that self-actualization effect. So, yes, listen to classical music, and I think that you'll have a much more positive self-image. So how can one get into classical music? Well, the reality is that today it's more easier to get into classical music than any time. So I'm such an old-fashioned person that I do buy CDs, and I listen to CDs on my CD player. But you can also listen to loads of classical music on streaming services. It's very easy to stream music or to buy music for download on MP3 at very low prices. Just find a particular piece of classical music or a composer who interests you and download or listen to some of their stuff on streaming. And if you don't want to pay any money at all, well, you're on YouTube. So you've got access to absolutely unlimited amounts of music here on YouTube. So you can find any composer, any symphony, any opera. You can listen to a whole opera on YouTube for absolutely nothing. Isn't that absolutely wonderful? And of course, on YouTube, you can listen to videos made by people who are much cleverer than I am, talking about classical music, giving a history of it, talking about particular composers, and helping you to build your appreciation of it. And of course, there's radio. We still have radios these days. In the UK, there are two main classical music stations. There's Radio 3, which is run by the BBC, which is maybe slightly more highbrow, produces very intelligent radio programs about classical music. You could hear lots of very sophisticated stuff from all sorts of composers on Radio 3. And there's also Classic FM, a commercial station. It does play lots of classical music, but it also plays some stuff which is maybe a little bit more lowbrow, film scores and symphonic arrangements of well-known pop songs. So it's maybe not quite as sophisticated Classic FM, but it's still worth listening to. There's some great stuff there. So yes, get into the habit of listening to classic music stations when you're in your car. So yes, that's my advice for you. Listen to classical music. So thank you ever so much for listening to me. And if you like this this content, please do give it a like. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, or whatever you want to do, and enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a really wonderful week. Bye bye.